What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2019, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauahana Friday, and whatever insanity is going to be coming down the pipe next. And there does seem to be a lot of it. In fact, Claire was just saying this morning, it just seems like the entire world is in thrash mode. It does feel crazy. And I understand that the availability of the internet and the independent media means we are far better informed than we used to be back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when corporate media basically was our only window onto the world. But it does seem like things are just a lot crazier now than they were maybe a decade ago. Well, 2 decades ago. We've been at war in Afghanistan for going on 18 years now. But it does feel like, you know, everybody's itching for a war and they're just waiting for somebody else to make the first move. All right, so let's get on into it here. Today, of course, is the spring equinox, officially the first day of spring. And it was a rough winter. And already the global warming cultists are out there saying, no, it wasn't that bad a winter. It was really, you people are just imagining all that snow, and, you know, you're just imagining all that snow melt that's now washing Nebraska away. And, you know, really, the planet is hot. Carbon dioxide is the enemy, and you've got to pay carbon taxes and do what we tell you to save the world here. And of course, Alexandria occasionally has a cortex, is leading that with her Green New Deal. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Right now, though, we're looking at Venezuela, and Ron Paul is basically out there saying, is Trump really about to attack Venezuela? And, of course, as you know, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo ordered the last of the U.S. diplomats out of Venezuela, saying their presence was a constraint on U.S. policy toward the country. And the wording seems to convey the idea that the U.S. is about to launch military action to place a Washington-backed, self-appointed politician to the presidency. Was it just bluster designed to intimidate? Or is the Trump administration really about to invade another country that has neither attacked nor threatened the United States? Well, Venezuela is not a threat to you. It's not a threat to me. Their oil is a threat to the petroleum corporations. And the fact that they sell their oil for any currency that the purchaser wishes to use is a threat to the hegemony of the United States dollar. So that is what they're going to spend your money and the lives of your children on, to protect the oil company profits and to keep the dollar supreme. That piece of ink and piece of paper with colored ink, you know, must be kept supreme no matter how many lives it takes, apparently, here. Now, overall, journalists outside of America's corporate media, they're doubting Guaido's legitimacy. And they understand this is just another classic United States regime change. And they're going on back, looking at February 23rd, where there was that stunt at the border between Colombia and Venezuela on a bridge which was not actually open and in use. And the stunt ended in a riot during which the supporters of Guaido burned the trucks that were supposed to transport the aid. Even the New York Times had to admit that, and then it was found out that the trucks also contain materials that could be used to build barricades and various other things. And, you know, Guaido's still out there saying that he has a legal right to make himself interim president based on Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution. But unfortunately, it doesn't apply to him because he waited too long. So this paragraph basically says that when an elected president becomes permanently unavailable to serve prior to his inauguration, which doesn't apply to Maduro, a new election by universal suffrage and direct ballot shall be held within 30 consecutive days. Pending election and inauguration of the new president, the president of the National Assembly shall take charge of the presidency of the Republic. Here's where it falls apart. Maduro is not unavailable. He's still the president. So Guido, basically, he's another U.S. puppet trying to take over another country for U.S. corporate interests. And let's face it, it makes a great distraction from the fact that the United States got its rear end polished over there in Syria. Okay, now, Lavrov's deputy, talking to Elliot Abrams, is saying that this Venezuela aid op is unacceptable. Russia will protect their interest. And what they're talking about is that apparently, despite Elliot Abrams' comments to these Russian pranksters, there do seem to be indications that the United States is seriously considering a full-on military intervention in Venezuela under the pretext of humanitarian aid. Those poor, suffering Venezuelans, we have to go in there and shoot them for their own good. And Russia is sending a message that they're not going to stand down. So Ryabkov said, we strongly urge the U.S. side against any temptation to resort to military power. It includes our warning against, so to speak, hardcore, massive military intervention, which can't be excluded given the type of behavior we've seen on the U.S. side in recent years. Which is certainly true. The U.S. can't seem to resist the invasion impulse. Ooh, look at that country. Let's invade it. Oh, there's a pretty country over there. Let's invade that one. Let's regime change it. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. More videos are coming on out from Venezuela. And we've got one of them up on whatreallyhappened.com. And again, the videos completely undermine this whole humanitarian aid story. There are plenty of products in the stores, and there are plenty of customers who are clearly able to buy these products. And this particular one that I'm looking at, they made a specific point of filming in the middle-class neighborhoods so they couldn't be accused of saying, well, you just went into the rich neighborhoods. Max Blumenthal is also out there with more of his videos saying, it's, you know, the stories that were being told about no toothpaste in the supermarkets and people starving to death and there being huge, huge bread lines. It's just not true. And he's saying there's massive amounts of produce. You know, there's a huge rabbit breeding program because rabbits are a high source of protein. There's a lot of urban gardening going on. Venezuela doesn't need our help. They have not attacked us. They have not threatened the American people or the United States of America. They are a threat to the bankers, the Federal Reserve, and the oil corporations. And that is the real reason. And if you are the parents of military-aged children, now's the time to start thinking. Do you want that child to go off and go through the experience of war, which even if they come back unscathed, will change them? Worse, of course, is they come back killed or crippled. Is that, you know, are you willing to go along with that just to make the bankers richer than they already are? Just to make the oil companies richer than they already are? Are you willing to go through that so that the world has to come crawling to the U.S. dollar for international commerce? I would say probably the answer for the vast majority of you is going to be no. All right. Article that came on out from Desert Peace, basically saying Western values change regimes from Gaza to Venezuela. And it says, what we're seeing in Venezuela makes us painfully aware. No state is safe from Western values, and values is in quotes. Even Egypt, Syria, Iran, Ukraine, and currently Venezuela and Gaza show how perfidious this method is. The United States is engaged in outright global imperialism. And they get you to go along with it by saying it's humanitarian. We're exporting our values to these other countries. Well, taking a look around this nation right now, I'm not sure that other nations would want our values. I'm not sure our values are really worth exporting to other countries. When you see what's going on in our streets, in our schools, with all this transgender nonsense, I think right now the values of the United States are pretty messed up. We ought to clean up our own act before we presume to be setting the model for the rest of the world. There was a time when the United States was looked up to as a moral and human rights leader, and we didn't have to invade other countries to do it. We led by example. We didn't point guns at these other people and say, you will do what we do, as we do it. We didn't have to. Over in Syria, the controversy continues over the April 2018 Douma chemical weapons attack that signaled the end of Jaish al-Islam's occupation. And life in the Syrian city is gradually returning to peace and stability. Now, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons interim report and final report have basically thrown the corporate media into total disarray. There was no sarin found. And of course, the corporate media, oh, Assad used sarin on his own people. Assad used sarin on his own people. What an evil man. We must send your children over there to get him for us, was the propaganda. And they fail to explain why Assad would do something that dumb. I mean, Assad is not a stupid man. He's running a country. And it doesn't make sense. He's winning the war. He was, back then, winning the war. And he realized that any kind of chemical weapons usage would give the United States an excuse to escalate on their side. So for that reason alone, he's not going to do it. And even if he was dumb enough to carry out a chemical weapons attack, why were women and children targeted rather than these U.S.-backed rebel groups? Well, the women and children were targeted to maximize the shock value, to get you by your emotions, to keep you from thinking about, did it make any sense at all? When you do a false flag, it has to have an emotional shock component to it, or people start asking questions. Anyway, the OPCW found that chlorine had been used. And so now the corporate media is scrambling to say, oh, well, Assad used chlorine. You know, we were wrong about the sarin, but Assad used chlorine. Really? How do you know that? Because it is the U.S.-backed rebels who have been caught with chlorine time and time and time again, with this constant attempt to criminalize the Syrian government and continue the unlawful aggression against Syria. Next, they're going to claim that Maduro is gassing his own people, or he's torturing kittens, or some such nonsense. Maduro has nuclear weapons. Maduro has nuclear weapons. And have you noticed that every time a pro-war lie gets exposed, the corporate media doesn't become any more skeptical of pro-war claims coming out of the government? It's like, oh, well, yeah, they lied the last time, but we believe this time that Maduro is an evil tyrant and he's starving his people. It must be true. The U.S. government says so. And every time one of these lies does get exposed, the corporate media just, it's an interesting development, you know, it's an example of how misinformation spreads, and, you know, it really is disgusting. Okay, Amnesty International has accused the United States of killing large numbers of civilians in Somalia over the past 2 years. And the organization said it had been able to document 14 civilians killed in investigations of just 5 airstrikes which is a tiny fraction of at least 110 such strikes the U.S. military says it has launched since June of 2017. Now, the U.S. military is rejecting Amnesty's report. It says it has killed 800 militants in airstrikes in Somalia, but has not wounded or killed a single civilian. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Okay, do you remember this former leader of Bosnia, Radovan Karadzic? And he was thrown in prison for genocide and war crimes for 40 years. And apparently the International Court at The Hague has revised his sentence to life imprisonment. So at least they got one of these murderous bastards behind bars here. It's one less. We need to throw some more of these genocidal tyrants into prison here. Okay, as you know, things have been very nervous down in Pakistan and India. And India has deployed a large-scale naval deployment, including nuclear submarines and an aircraft carrier, which made Pakistan a little bit more nervous. But India has sent a message to Pakistan not to worry. This is not aimed at you. We're sending a message to China. Now, I'm rather amazed that India thinks they could take on China, unless India thinks they're going to be working with a much larger coalition against China. And it does seem like much of the Pentagon budget is aimed at an eventual confrontation with China, along with the confrontation with Russia. I think it would be a mistake, but they don't listen to me. Apparently up in the Kashmir, hundreds of Rohingya refugee children were forced out of government institutions into makeshift schools, and apparently the schools well, they're basically kicked out of the schools, and they're living with this constant fear of expulsion. I wish somebody would settle that down. You know, I think King Solomon was right here. Let's just cut it down the middle. Pakistan gets this chunk. India gets this chunk. Everybody goes back to just, you know, growing their food, farming, manufacturing, engaging in commerce, and just living a pleasant life. Why is that something that our leaders seem to feel we don't deserve? Just leading a pleasant life. Alrighty, we're coming up on elections in Thailand, which is an amazingly corrupt government, even by U.S. standards. And opposition groups attempting to take power and remove Thailand's powerful independent military from Thai politics are receiving extensive, well-documented funding and political support from Washington, London, Brussels, Western corporate foundations, including George Soros Open Society Foundation. Now, the military are running Thailand right now because they ousted the previous insanely corrupt government. And it looks like there's another plan to oust the government of a country and replace it with Western-backed puppets here. Now, Thailand serves as a pivotal regional hub economically and geopolitically. It has the second largest economy in the region and remains the only Southeast Asian state to have avoided Western colonization. Well, by golly, that can't stand. We've colonized the rest of them. We can't have little upstart Thailand just flipping the bird at us like that. Now, Thailand by necessity maintains ties with the West and Western allies like Japan. But it is less than wonderfully obedient. For all these reasons and more, the U.S. has been involved in long-term regime change efforts in Thailand, starting at least as early as 2001, with billionaire and former Carlyle Group advisor Thaksin Shinawatра's ascent to political power. Shinawatra is the one the military kicked out. So what we have is another country that was taken over with a junta. They kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler. Now the U.S. is going in for another try. Got to take a break for commercials. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, I feel the need to say thank you to all of you who have already and continue to donate to Republic Broadcasting Network and also whatreallyhappened.com. Because especially with this last year, had you not done so and been doing so, we wouldn't be here. That's the reality. And so we do need you to keep on supporting us. If you haven't donated, now's a good time to step on in. And I realize it's tight for everybody. But like I said before, there's no such thing as too small a donation. I mean, if everybody listening to this broadcast sent in just $5 to Republic Broadcasting, that would really have a tremendous positive impact. We're not a big, giant TV network. We don't have on-air hosts who are making million-dollar salaries. You know, we're on a real shoestring budget here, although in my case, it's a sandal budget. So anyway, if you can help out, please do. And the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can do a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. I thank you. It's teamwork. It's a partnership going on between us all. Okay, we're going to go to the phones here to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. You know, Mike, I love your work. I probably agree with you 99.99% of the time.
Good.
But I have to call you out on that story. You reported about Karadzic at the ICC, where he was sentenced to life. The ICC, and I'm sure you know this, is a political weapon used by the West. I mean, the U.S. itself doesn't even recognize its jurisdiction. This is a court that allegedly was responsible for Milosevic's death, the former leader of Serbia, where there was a lack of evidence. They were saying that he was basically allowed to die. He wasn't given his medication. This is a court, and the corporate report did an excellent, he wrote an excellent article about this. It's basically used to go after African dictators and enemies of the West. This man, you've mentioned Karadzic, and there was also Mladic. Yes, they probably did commit crimes, but there were more egregious crimes committed by the Croats and the Muslim side, and these people weren't even prosecuted because they were on the U.S., they were on the West side. If you recall,
let's be blunt. They were on the winning side. I mean, if you go back to Nuremberg, you know, where they basically raked the Germans over the coals. But, you know, the Allies had committed equal crimes. I mean, they literally starved German POWs to death. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the winners get to basically punish the losers, and that is not likely to change.
And then, Mike, I just wanted to say this. The West has become, I'm sure you've heard this before, has become the new Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union in the past was very active around the world, aiding revolutionary groups to effect regime change, the U.S. is doing the exact same thing. And if you recall, too, the Soviet Union would abuse its psychiatric, its medical sector by sending dissidents to psychiatric wards. I believe Sakharov was held there for some time. Now you have the French ordering Marine Le Pen to undergo psychiatric treatment for those tweets that she sent about ISIS.
Yes.
So it's a complete reversal.
Yeah. We have met the enemy, and they are us.
Yeah, that's all I have. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. Speaking of the International Criminal Court, there is a schism opening up between The Hague and the United States, and even the mass media is shocked by the mafia-style outbursts of U.S. government officials basically saying, no, you will not investigate us for war crimes. And the court, which sits in The Hague, responded that it was an independent and impartial institution and would continue to do its work undeterred by Washington's actions. So that little nudge, nudge, wink, wink, you're not going to investigate our war crimes, you'll just investigate the other guy's war crimes, that may have been tossed out the window by U.S. arrogance. Because now the ICC, in order to protect its legitimacy, they have to do something. They have to be seen to take steps. And we might actually see some war crimes prosecutions against the U.S. and its allies. And I find it rather amazing that in their denouncing the ICC and withdrawing all of their visas of their personnel, that the U.S. also included Israel in there. You won't investigate Israel. And as you probably have already heard, the Palestinians are already up in the ICC trying to bring war crimes charges against Israel. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you know, the Turkish army back in 1974 invaded the island of Cyprus, and they still occupy part of it. And the Cypriots are a little upset because the Turkish army is trying to change the cultural identity of the northern half of Cyprus, which is an area with literally thousands of years of rich history. And we have unfortunately seen that as a hallmark of invaders, of going into a country and wanting to erase signs of the previous cultures that were there. We certainly are seeing it with Israel and Gaza. We saw it with the United States, even in Iraq. And apparently since 1974's violent displacement of all of these Greek Cypriots, the northern part of Cyprus has occupied not just by Turkish Cypriots, from whom the vast majority were already living on the island. So there's a little bit of tension over there. Okay, people are still talking about the New Zealand mosque massacre. Police are now saying there may have been an intended third target. Nobody really knows. And apparently, Daesh spokesman Abu Hassan al-Majahar has posted a new message on social media calling for Muslims to take vengeance for their religion in response to the terrorist attack in Christchurch. This was a 44-minute recorded message that was posted on Telegram Monday from the Daesh spokesperson, who had been presumed dead. Surprise, he's back here. And in this recording, Mujahir, or somebody pretending to be him, called for revenge killings in retaliation for the Christchurch attack on 2 mosques, who himself claimed to be, which was supposed to be revenge for Muslim terror attacks on Europeans. Now, what was it Gandhi said? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and soon the whole world is blind and toothless. And this gets back to the idea. Is somebody trying to fan up war between Christians and Muslims? And that would be very dangerous given to the high degree to which Muslims and Christians have been blurred together with all this globalist open border stuff. Now, Sibel Edmonds came on out with a new video. She's in Turkey. She's been in Turkey for a while. And she's saying that Turkey may be the next hotspot in the Middle East, but she also came on out. She was investigating the New Zealand shooter arrival in the country and how it coincided with a bombing that targeted Jews. And she's asking, what are the chances of one individual's both entries into a country coinciding with these events? And as a matter of fact, I was on the Richie Allen show earlier today, and Richie brought it up that, it did seem this guy was all over the place. He was in all these countries, and at the same time he was in these countries, something ugly happened. So this guy may have been an operative. Is an operative. He's still alive. And they're going to have a show trial, and they'll put him into witness protection. But it would certainly explain the extreme casualness shown on the video when he was just shooting the people. Apparently, this is just the sort of thing he's been doing all along. Now, William Craddock at the Disobedient Media has written an article entitled Evidence Indicates Link Between the North Korean Embassy Break-In and the Christchurch Attacks, which points to evidence that a paramilitary group was involved, both with the Christchurch massacre and while the corporate media is only naming the single suspect, Brenton Tarrant. We need to remember, he was arrested with other suspects, a total of 4, 3 men and a woman. And Disobedient Media's article says that Tarrant and his group likely have professional military connections. And that seems to make sense because yesterday we were reporting on the fact that Australian police had located where this Tarrant had bought some of the guns that he had in his car, but they couldn't identify where he got that military-style rifle that he actually used in the shooting. So the official narrative is being pushed, crazed lone nut assassin. But the early reports, again, 4 people arrested. At one point, it was reported there were 2 shooters. And even more importantly, the police were saying there were improvised explosive devices, plural, found attached to the vehicles, again plural, used by the suspects, again the plural. So it does look like there were multiple people involved. And New Zealand is trying to just slam this whole thing down. I mean, to the point where the president of New Zealand got up in Parliament, or the Prime Minister rather, and basically said, I'm not even going to say this guy's name anymore. He should just be erased from the face of the earth here. Jim Stone is writing the fact that New Zealand has ID'd everybody who saved that Christchurch live stream and arrested them without bail does mean they have something to hide. And it's insane. Why are they so obsessed about this? Why are they so worked up about people having copies of this that they're going around arresting people who have it? Okay, there's something in that video that is going to blow the whole story wide open. Apparently, one of the people that's been arrested, Philip Neville Arps, has been arrested. He's 44 years old. Bail was denied. His next appearance will be in court on April 15th. Now, this guy runs an installation business, and he faces 2 charges of distributing the live stream of the mosque shooting. I mean, that's total tyranny and dictatorship. Apparently, in Masterton, New Zealand, a woman has been arrested for a Facebook post after the mosque shooting, and she didn't post the video, she just made commentary about it, and she's been arrested for inciting racial disharmony, which carries a maximum penalty of 3 months imprisonment or a $7,000 fine. And Senior Sergeant Jennifer Hansen said the Facebook post upset a number of people because it referred to the events at Christchurch. So I guess they've all become hypersensitive, easily offended, easily shocked snowflakes down in New Zealand as well. Yeah, okay. I mean, we're about to enter a global recession. How are all these hypersensitive, easily wounded people going to get by? They need to toughen up here a little bit. Now, there's another little aspect of this that's come on out. As you know, New Zealand is one of the Five Eyes countries, along with Britain, the United States, Canada, and Australia, who collaborate on mass surveillance of all the people everywhere. They spy on each other's countries and trade the information to bypass laws against spying on their own citizens. And the New Zealand Intelligence Agency has this notoriously off-leash invasive surveillance apparatus. Okay, why didn't they see this guy coming? I mean, they could see he should have known he was buying up a lot of guns. I imagine down in New Zealand they have these little supermarket cards or store shoppers cards which track what you buy. And if he started buying stuff to make improvised explosive devices, it should have triggered some kind of alert. But it turns out that apparently New Zealand's intelligence apparatus is totally focused on environmental activists. And they have been caught spying on New Zealand Greenpeace, the New Zealand Green Party, the MANA movements, and the Anti-Trans-Pacific Partnership activists. And New Zealand was also caught giving private corporate spies access to its national surveillance data to help them hunt down and neutralize activists. Apparently, the New Zealand police also abused these records, accessing them without a warrant on thousands of occasions to spy on Kiwi activists. And so this shooter just slipped on through, which kind of, wasn't that the whole point of all this spying? We're going to catch the bad guys before they do bad things. And again, the media is totally focused on, these poor Muslims. They got shot, they got killed. It's really horrible. Meanwhile, of course, on Saturday, March 16th, last Saturday, 10 Christians were murdered in Nigeria. That brings the number of Christians killed in the country to 140. And they don't get the coverage in the corporate media. It almost does look like somebody wants to fan up the Muslims into a holy war, a jihad. And just to show how shameless people can be in exploiting tragedy for their own agenda, the activist group Women's March used the terrorist attack on the mosque to solicit donations from supporters. Women's March sent out a fundraising email from co-chair Linda Sarsour, who asked supporters to give the gift of justice by donating to the activist organization she leads. We could adopt that slogan, give the gift of truth, donate to Republic Broadcasting. That's a good one. I think we should use that one. Over in Haiti, there's been a little bit of an embarrassment because apparently a group of U.S. mercenaries got caught up in this half-baked scheme to move $80 million for Haiti's president, who is not likely to be president for very much longer. And so apparently these mercenaries flew in an 8-passenger charter airplane with a stockpile of semi-automatic rifles, handguns, Kevlar bulletproof vests, and knives. Most had already been paid $10,000 up front, and they were promised another $20,000 after they finished the job. They were met at the airport with a trio of politically connected Haitians. And they were whisked through the airport, avoiding customs and immigration agents, so they could just walk on in with their guns. So apparently it was too good a deal for the band of semi-employed military veterans and security contractors to turn down. But there'll be fallout from this one as the story gets on out there. And remember that coffee mug that we have over in our online store here. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and it looks like that's what Haiti's president was getting ready to do. $80 million. Talk about being greedy. I mean, the guy's headed into retirement. You don't need $80 million to retire. Over at the United Nations, the Independent Commission of Inquiry on the protest in the occupied Palestinian territory presented its full report the first part of this week, saying Israeli forces breached international human rights by using live ammunition against unarmed Palestinian protesters. The report doesn't mention the butterfly bullets. These were these expanding bullets that just maximize the destruction here. The UN has now submitted a list of specific names of Israeli officers to the International Criminal Court up in The Hague. And we'll see what's going to happen there. No doubt the United States is now going to try and kiss and make up with the ICC and say, forget about all that nonsense about mafia stuff here, and we're still not going to give you the visas to investigate our war crimes, but really you can't investigate Israel war crimes. It would be a terrible thing. I mean, just remember the Holocaust Have you noticed they always go back to remember the Holocaust? I'm sorry, I'm 66 years old, coming up on 67. All of whatever is supposed to have happened in Germany happened before I was even born, and I just don't care about it anymore. Israel supporters will come on back and say, well, you share in the guilt. No, I don't. I don't feel guilty over anything that happens that I don't have direct influence on. This whole collective guilt nonsense, whether it's used by Israel or whether it's used by the reparations people, it's nonsense. It's just another manipulation. Anyway, getting on back to Israel, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories says that Israel is deliberately depriving the Palestinians of clean water. And the reporter, Michael Link, says basically it's an act of pillage to basically steal the resources from the Palestinians. We were reporting just yesterday how Israel was shutting off water in various parts of the occupied West Bank, claiming the water sources were illegal, and the Palestinians are saying, how can they be illegal? They're on our land. It's wells on our land. How can they be illegal? But again, apparently the UN is taking notice of the fact that Israel has a policy of usurping Palestinian natural resources and that it's robbed the Palestinians of vital assets. I would like to see something come of this, but at least the United Nations had this spinal fortitude, if you will, to stand up and say, look, what's going on is wrong. Israel, of course, is ignoring it. They're saying, oh, you anti-Semites, you Jew haters, Nazis, Nazis, Hitler, 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 Holocaust, 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 Holocaust. And Israel just announced that they're going to begin the construction of 840 new illegal settlement units in the West Bank. And they're designed to attract young settler families to the second largest Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank. And the project will include shopping malls, education facilities, parks, and attraction sites serving the new illegal Jewish community. Now, Mayor of Ariel, Eli Shaviro, said that the settlement project came in response to the killing of an Israeli soldier and a settler near the illegal settlement, which is built on the occupied land of the Palestinian city of Salfit. So basically, Israel's attitude is, we're going to build an illegal settlement, and if you fight back against us, we'll just build another illegal settlement. That's the way it's all going to work here. Now, over at the United Nations, apparently Israel has set up a photo exhibition, or is about to, showing its humanitarian work around the world, for everywhere except, of course, for Palestine. And it's just a blatant propaganda effort to try and polish their image ahead of any possible UN votes regarding Israel's behavior. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're talking about Israel's public relations outreach, which has always been very intense. They're always out there, basically promoting the Holocaust and, Jewish suffering and Jewish victimhood. And apparently, along with this photo exhibit that they had at the UN, Bet Salam is out there saying that Israel's claim of investigations into these atrocities being committed against the Palestinians are a whitewash. And they're designed to perpetuate the killing in Gaza. And B'Tselem issued a position paper explaining that Israel's promise to investigate 11 incidents in which protesters were killed is just propaganda. He called it a tapestry of lies. And basically said that announcing investigations is a standard ploy that Israel uses to ease international pressure whenever its unlawful policies elicit criticism. And that's true here. Now, Israel yesterday asked 26 countries for support against a United Nations vote that singles out its violation of international human rights and humanitarian law in the occupied Gaza Strip. So apparently they're already out there lobbying the UN members to vote against the war crimes bill. And apparently Foreign Minister Yisrael Katz wrote a letter to the countries not to vote in favor of Israel's alleged violations against Palestinians demonstrators that could be covered by war crimes and crimes against humanity at the UN Human Rights Council. And he said the UN report ignored Hamas rockets and lacked understanding of the security concerns of Israel. Well, you know, you did steal their country, basically. And that's another one of Israel's pieces of propaganda. There never was a Palestine. Remember Golda Meir always used to say, there was no such thing as Palestine. And then a postcard surfaced that she had mailed that indicated it was sent from Palestine. Apparently, over in the Shufat refugee camp in occupied East Jerusalem, Israeli bulldozers demolished an under-construction building that was supposed to be a school. And dozens of the Israeli soldiers escorted bulldozers into the refugee camp, surrounded the Al-Razi school, went up on rooftops of nearby buildings, drones were flying overhead, and then the bulldozers demolished the building. And the Israeli forces fired rubber-coated steel bullets toward locals. So that's probably one of the reasons why Israel really hates the independent media. The corporate media never covers any of this stuff. The corporate media is totally controlled by Israel, the same as our Congress. And the independent media represents the people of the world breaking free from the matrix. It's another reason you should be supporting Republic Broadcasting. Over in Great Britain, at King's College London, pro-Palestine students... there's the music. We got to take a break for station identification. I'll do this story after we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got a couple of callers waiting, but I do want to finish up this story here. Over at King's College London, pro-Palestinian students were denied access to the university during a visit by the Queen. And this is, of course, coming one day into Israeli Apartheid Week. The Queen had stepped out to thronging crowds to open a refurbished building at the university's Strand campus in central London. These pro-Palestine students missed classes. Some of them missed exams, which is really very, very critical for them. And it's not like they did anything or presented a threat to the Queen, but apparently being pro-Palestine is now considered a security threat by the British government. Okay, let's go to the phones here. James in Sacramento. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Michael. Two things, and this is just always gets me. George Soros. And, I've seen these things on TV, the History Channel, the American Hero Channel, and then they show how the Israelis hunted down all of these Nazi collaborators and, put them all into a judicial system and, brought them to justice,
Yes.
And no one mentions George Soros.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, he's actually admitted on TV. He helped the Nazis hunt down Jews.
Yeah.
And he made
actually round. That's where he got all of his money. Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of wondering where he got his inside coverage. Where he had somebody doing a CYA on him. It just blows my mind how he got away with what he did, and he's still out there doing what he does.
Yes, it does. It does raise questions. I mean, Israel traditionally has shown immense hostility to anybody who collaborated with the Nazis, but apparently not Soros. I guess when you have enough money and you're sharing it with Israel, you get off scot-free.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out exactly how he pulled that off, but obviously we're never going to learn that. Hey, the other thing I had was I was watching 3 Days of the Condor the other day. It was on TV, and I love that show.
Yes.
That's actually a great movie, and at the end of it, he figures out why he was reading the books that and it talked about the Middle East, and it talked about Venezuela, you know, and that was back in 1975.
Yes.
And it was about oil.
It was always about the oil.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's intense, especially at the end, you know, when, what is it, Cliff Robertson?
Yes.
He tells him, so what if they don't print it? You know?
Which we know today would be the likely outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it just blew my mind, you know, and you got to respect, what's his name, Max von Sydow.
Yes.
He comes into the room with the, and he shoots the guy in the head and makes it look like a suicide. I mean, it was just so hilarious how they portrayed all of that, you know, just this dirty politics and whatever you want to do, you can get away with it if you've got the right people doing the work for you. I just had to laugh. I was, you know, I haven't seen that movie in a few years. And, you know, and one of the things that blew me away was when he talked about Venezuela, you know.
Yes. Well, I mean, even back then, it was known Venezuela had a lot of oil. They were a major oil exporter even back then.
It just blows my mind, you know, how you know, we forget a lot of stuff, you know, and yet it winds up. Well, what is it they say? If you don't learn anything, you're going to be bound to repeat it.
Those who refuse to learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, that was it for me, man. And George Soros was somebody I just can't believe that the Israelis, with all of their hunting down of all these people, have never said a word about George Soros.
It does beggar the imagination. I mean, you know, Israel is so desperate to keep this whole Nazi thing going. They're going after the people who fed the guard dogs. They're going after accountants who worked in the camps, you know, people who didn't actually participate in anything that would be considered illegal. But by God, you were there, you're guilty. And again, Soros has admitted on TV he collaborated with the Nazis to hunt down fellow Jews, for which he was handsomely paid.
It was something like about 10,000 or something Jews out of Hungary that he sent.
Yep.
You know, and he collected all of their wealth. He's, we'll give it back to you when you get out of prison.
Yep. That was bad stuff.
That was the part that makes me laugh so hard. Is that, I mean, seriously, he just totally smoked them, man. And you know, you look at our politics today, and that's kind of like where they.
Well, I think there's something else there. I mean, I'm sure he's in bed with the CIA. They may have brought him over here during Operation Paperclip. Anyway, James, we're going to let you go here.
All right,
thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to go back to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, a quick comment on George Soros. I mean, the guy's a hugely wealthy financier tied in with the Rothschild family, so I'm sure he's got his Zionist connections, and of course the Israelis aren't going to go after him. I mean, he's big money, and Israel, that's one of the major functions of Israel, is that it's a financial hub. It's the army of the Rothschild and the bankers, Zionist bankers. That's their muscle.
Yes.
Israel. So they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And Soros is one of the hands that feeds them. I mean, he's the one, you were talking about Thailand earlier, he's the one that broke the Thai baht back in the 90s, and they hate him over there.
Yes. Yeah, they do. In fact, I think probably there's very few places outside of elite power circles where Soros is liked. I think he's hated pretty much all over the world. Certainly in all these countries where they've got these open borders problems. And, apparently we had a technical glitch. And we lost Joe. So let's move to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Newspaper from Greece. And there was an article that stated Today in Jerusalem, the Prime Minister of Greece, the head of Cyprus, the United States Secretary of State, and Netanyahu are meeting to talk about security and energy in the Mediterranean. Now, when you were talking about Turkey, because right now there's a lot of tension between Greece and Turkey, and plus on Monday, Trump called the head of Greece. And I'm wondering, are these guys planning on doing something?
Well, again, it's all about the oil here, and I think that the United States is going to basically recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan, which has got a lot of oil and gas underneath it. But I think the wider issue, and the reason that Cyprus is involved there, is that Israel is trying to change the rules on how you determine a nation's territorial waters. And what they want to do is sort of spread out and grab a larger part of the eastern end of the Mediterranean, where there is known to be a lot of oil and gas. And I think that's probably the agenda.
Okay. Well, also, doesn't the United States have a military base or an Air Force base in Cyprus?
I believe that they do. They've got bases everywhere.
Well, that's true. Okay, Michael, I'll let you go. Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Yeah, Michael, let me ask you a question. Maybe you can answer this. The million illegals that are supposedly supposed to be deported out of the country, what's going to happen with them? How did they get able to stay here? I mean, this is unbelievable. And now they're reporting that a million of them or more, maybe 2 million, already have the deportation orders to get out of here, and they're still here?
Yes.
What the hell's going on?
Well, the liberal Democrats are basically blocking everything that can be done. Liberal judges are throwing up legal barriers, and it's all about stealing the 2020 election. Now, over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton came out the other day saying, pardon me, they estimated some 900,000, almost 1 million illegal immigrants voted in the recent midterm elections. And with that many guaranteed Democratic voters, if you locate them carefully, you put them into the just slightly red districts, just enough of them to turn slightly blue, then you can start taking over seats in the House of Representatives. And I think that's what happened in California, which is a traditionally Republican state, or has been. And then all of a sudden they had, I forget how many, but quite a few of their districts flipped from Republican to Democrat, and they loaded up the House of Representatives. And they're going to try again in 2020.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Michael, because what's going on with this is mind-boggling to me, because there in South Florida, I know that's happening. It's happening in California. When I heard Hannity a couple months ago say there's almost 6 million illegals in that state alone, which was the state of Ronald Reagan and Nixon, I mean, this is mind-boggling what's happened here.
It is.
It's beyond comprehension, to tell you the truth, because now you have the election coming up. You have the media. Look what they did to Judge Janine Pirro talking about the Muslim woman. They fired her. I guess they fired her. I don't know what they did to her.
It's a 2-week
I guess
suspension.
they got rid of her.
It's a 2-week suspension.
Okay, well, Michael, she's probably the only one that's on the major idiot box. I call it the idiot box, that actually can tell you was speaking truth to matter. And,
well, let's not forget Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, well, but Judge Janine hits it right out of the park. And, look at Michigan. I'm telling you, they're going to go with Sharia law there in the next 20 years. You'll see. It's unbelievable. This is unreal what's happened in the United States. It really is.
Yeah.
Michael, the main thing, I'll let you guys know you got another caller. OA and One American News, every hour on the hour, shows you the figures of illegal immigration, how much it costs the American taxpayers. Yes, sir. It's up to $56 billion is what I saw today. And on the screen, it says 46,000 since January have snuck into the United States. I don't think that's right. I think it's much higher than that.
I would tend to think it's much higher than that, because the border is not only not secured, it's not even really monitored. They're trying to basically guess on the number of people coming through based on those that, are caught by Border Patrol. But it's anybody's guess. You would think with all the surveillance satellites that we have, that they could keep an eye on the border and get an accurate count. But again, there are just unfortunately too many parties in this country who want the illegals to come on in, whether it's the Democrats who want the guaranteed votes or business owners who think it's going to be a source of cheap labor. But those illegal immigrants aren't going to be able to work for any less than Americans who are already on the minimum wage. The only way you could pay the illegals less is if they're not paying taxes. Again, we're the victims of a slow motion invasion. You know, in the good old days when you were being invaded, you would see they would mass at the border and then try and come across, and your military could stand there and basically push them back. But we are the victims of a slow motion invasion. So is Europe.
Well, Michael, it's all for the vote. This whole thing is about the demographic to change the country.
Yes.
Of the vote. And, you know, they had a thing on Ukraine the other day. I don't know if you had a chance to see where all these people are breaking out with the measles and mumps. Did you see that?
Yes. And, of course, the corporate media is out there saying that's what they get for not getting the vaccines. But, yeah, this open border thing it's a public health crisis as well. We're seeing diseases brought back into this country that had previously been eradicated. And again, you know, the corporate media is out there saying, oh, get your vaccines. You know, you want to be safe, get your vaccines. It really is just a crazy, crazy situation.
Well, Michael, you know what? And one more thing. I know the sanctuary cities, whoever supports that, I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican, they should be arrested.
I agree.
That's aiding, colluding, and sedation. That's aiding and colluding an illegal invasion. And I don't know why Trump, who's the commander-in-chief of the military armed forces of the United States, doesn't have these people arrested. He should call them out right now. He don't have to go through Congress and all that. He's the president. He's supposed to he can declare martial law, actually. He can say, hey, look, you are going to be arrested because you are aiding and colluding an illegal invasion and sedation of the nation, and you're trying to destroy this nation. That's what Donald Trump, being the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, should say. There's no such thing as sanctuary city. That's like saying, okay, you got a sanctuary city for robbing a bank or for stealing food out of a store. You should be caught and put in jail until you could come to your trial. And I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to rule, but it's against the law what they're doing. It's called aiding and colluding, and they're actually breaking all the laws of this country and our Constitution. And Trump, being the president, should call them out right now.
Well, there's Title 8.
There's
Title 8.
Schumer.
You know, Title 8 covers all of this, and it has some very stiff punishment for those who employ, aid, transport, or house illegal immigrants. Right. What's really amazing, and it's actually astounding, is apparently Democrats aren't even aware of this. Our Senator Mazie Hirono here in Hawaii, apparently during one of these committee meetings, you know, she was told they're committing crimes, and she was out there, no, they're not committing a crime. Yeah, they are. It apparently came as a shock to her that there actually is a law that says it is a crime to simply step over the border without the permission of the Immigration Service.
That's correct. That is correct. I read that up, and it's very true. And I understand, though, why Trump, who's the president of the country, he's top executive, he doesn't stop this. And why is it in the mass media? I mean, I think he should have a lot of these people in the media rounded up because they're colluding this that uses sedation on the American public. They're sedating us with this lie.
They absolutely are.
No doubt about it. It's all a big, filthy lie, what they're doing. And I tell you, Michael, this 2020 election, like you said, it's going to be a humdinger. It's going to be a real humdinger, I'm telling you.
Okay.
And
I'm afraid the Democrats are going to take power. They're going to get the White House. They're going to get both houses of Congress, and they will never, ever let go. The GOP is finished because they're not willing to do what's necessary.
I have to say
this. The GOP is not
I'll
willing
agree
to
with
do
you on that.
Hey, may I finish?
Yes, sure. Yeah, sorry.
The GOP is not willing to do what's necessary to correct this situation. And that's why they're going to lose in 2020, and they're going to lose big time. That's my prediction. Anyway, Tom, anything else?
College campuses, Michael, you're right. How about the colleges?
Yes.
Millennials.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. I listened. I'd like to couple of subjects that I don't hear being covered. First of all, when Trump speaks about, he makes a comment that seems to be off the wall. By now, we know that something's going to happen later that's going to bring back that subject you brought up. And when he's talking about McCain now, that means that we're going to start hearing about how putrid this guy was as far as the crimes that he committed, besides the Forrestal, accident that he caused, besides the POW sellout that he did, that he was a sponsor with ISIS. The guy was a criminal who was taking money from the cartels. And, this guy is going to come out, and Trump, he throws us these little tidbits, and then they come out later. This is why he's speaking about it before. And I think that's what they keep, about Trump. What's wrong with, why is he saying this?
Well, I don't think Trump is quite that deep. I think Trump was simply reacting to the confirmation that John McCain was part of the conduit through which that discredited Christopher Steele dossier reached the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the corporate media. And with that confirmation, I think Trump just got a little angry, which I certainly understand that, except that generally you don't like presidents who get angry, because when presidents get angry, bad things will happen. But he took it out basically on Twitter. McCain's family has fired back, and the tiff continues that way. Anyway, Curtis, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And we're not going to be able to take phone calls for a little while. We're having some technical issues. And like I said before, the equipment is old, it's worn out, and, we're just holding it all together with Scotch tape and baling wire. We're talking about Israel. We're talking about how they're just trying to maintain their control over what's going on. So over at Pitzer College, and this is out in Claremont, California, they pride themselves on running a democratic governance. The students have a voice in school policies. So Pitzer College's governing council took an historic vote to suspend a program of study at the University of Haifa because of Israel's discriminatory policies. And it passed by 67 to 28. And just 3 hours later, that resolution was vetoed by the college president, Melvin Oliver. And it's the first time in the history of Pitzer that a college president exercised his veto over a resolution. Now, obviously, the students are very angry about the veto. They're justifiably concerned that President Melvin Oliver is another Israeli puppet. And apparently they're circulating a petition condemning Oliver, and it's already gotten several hundred signatures. Okay. Now, there was a wonderful article, came from MiddleEastEye.net, and it puts things in perspective regarding Israel and Palestine. And the article is titled, "Nightmare Neighbors, What If a Religious Settler Project Took Over Britain?" And it says, imagine a situation in which an extremist British government introduces a law that determines that only British Christians have a right to self-determination in the country, and that settlements built only for Christians should be encouraged. So non-Christian Brits are explicitly turned into second-class citizens. Communities with majority Christian populations set up admissions committees to which those wishing to move need to apply for admission, which can be refused. One morning you wake up, you look out your window, only to find that a group of strangers have forced their way into your back garden, cordoned part of it off, and started digging. You challenge them, and they tell you this is Christian Britain, and as Christian Britons, they can build anywhere because this land is ours. And you politely ask them to leave, but they refuse. Instead, they lay foundations. A truck brings in a mobile home into which they move. You try to rip out the fence they've set up, but a couple of burly armed security guards appear, threaten you, and move the fence further toward your home so they can set up their caravan and toilet. Now, obviously, what this article is talking about is Israel's recently passed basic law. Not to mention Netanyahu's comment that Israel is a nation only for the Jewish people. And, of course, the way that Israel is constantly nibbling off bits of Palestine. And it does put it in perspective. How would you feel if it happened to you? put yourself in the place of the Palestinians, and how would you feel about what was being done to you? And I think you would understand why the Palestinians feel the way that they do. Okay. A prominent Iraqi security expert revealed intensifying U.S. pressures on Baghdad to avoid approving a bill that basically calls for the expulsion of foreign forces. And the security expert, Abbas al-Ardawi, says that the reason for this is that the American embassy in Baghdad, which is gigantic, is acting as the U.S. Israeli operations room against the entire Middle East. And a lot of people were saying, when this thing was being built, and people were saying, wow, this thing is really huge for an embassy. And a lot of people said, this is going to be some kind of a command post. So this Abbas al-Ardawi was quoted by the Arabic language Al-Ma'alome News website, saying that the U.S. administration is exerting pressures on Baghdad and killing time to prolong its deployment in Iraq. So, once in Iraq, always in Iraq. We're seeing that in Syria. They're trying to stay there. They don't want to leave Syria. They would have to admit they lost there. They don't want to leave Afghanistan. They'd have to admit they're losing there. And nobody's really sure what the United States accomplished in Iraq, because there never were any weapons of mass destruction. And Saddam wasn't aiding al-Qaeda. And Saddam didn't, in fact, have anything to do with 9/11. Getting on back to Israel, the UN war crimes investigators are calling on Israel to stop its snipers from using lethal force against the protesters in the Gaza Strip. And that's very timely, because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Great March of Return. And Israel has basically shot more than 6,000 people. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Up in Canada, Justin Trudeau appears to be in trouble. He's got that SNC-Lavalin scandal, Judy Wilson-Raybell's testimony, and his approval ratings are plummeting. And a recent poll is showing that Justin Trudeau will lose to the Conservative Party next election by a wide, wide margin, if you can trust the polls. But I think, based on some Canadians we've had calling into the show, that they're tired of liberalism as well. They're as tired of this liberalism as most Americans are here as well. And it has to do with the fact, I think, that liberals have this illusion or delusion that they are smarter than the rest of us, and that therefore we should just let them do whatever it is they want to do, and that anybody who says, I doubt this, we're obviously some kind of troglodyte who should be silenced. Ooh, conservative troglodyte here. We're talking about things like, letting men use the women's restroom, that kind of stuff. I think we all kind of got tired of that. We're getting tired of this indoctrination of children in schools to convince them that they should want to be transgender or want to be LGBTQ. And we need to get back to the basics, which is where government takes care of the nation and its people, and the people decide for themselves how they want to live their lives. And they're able to live their lives any way they want, as long as they don't intrude into the lives of others. It's a very basic approach. So anyway, Trudeau looks like he's in trouble here. Over in North Korea, there's a report by the Japanese daily Asahi, and it's revealing that a key reason talks with the U.S. broke down last month in Hanoi was that the U.S. was accusing North Korea of having secret nuclear facilities and demanding that Kim Jong-un admit to their existence and reveal where they were. And Kim Jong-un came back and said, no, there are no secret facilities. All of our facilities are right there where your satellites are showing them. And Kim Jong-un, basically said, if the sanctions go away, all the facilities will be closed. And it's kind of a no-win situation. And that's why the talks broke down. And Kim Jong-un is apparently very disgusted at this U.S. approach. We know you've got weapons of mass destruction. We went through that with Iraq. When there were talks before the actual war began, where Saddam was trying to keep the war from happening. And the U.S. went in and said, we know you've got nuclear weapons. And Saddam said, no, we don't. And, we don't. And the U.S. said, well, if you're not going to admit to it and tell us where they are, the war is on. It's like going up to somebody and asking them, have you stopped beating your wife? Article out of Global Research up in Canada. As you know, part of the propaganda war against China is, human rights. Oh, they're abusing the human rights of whoever it is out there in the western part of China. And China decided that they were going to issue their report on human rights in the United States. And their report made the following introductory remarks. As in previous years, the latest U.S. reports on human rights in world community nations continued pointing fingers at and slandering human rights situations in over 190 countries while blindly ignoring its own serious human rights problems. If one takes a glimpse into the human rights situation of the United States in 2018, it will not be difficult to find that the United States government, a self-styled human rights defender, has a human rights record which is deeply flawed. The double standards of human rights it pursues are obvious. Yes, they are. They really are. Now, over at Bloomberg, there was this article written which basically says that progressives should love the Pentagon budget. And this was written by Hal Brands. And Bloomberg identifies Brands as the Henry Kissinger Distinguished Professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, there's a mouthful, and Senior Fellow at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. Now, Kissinger is ominous enough, but the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, is it some innocuous, wonky academic institution? Well, actually, no, because if you go over to the website for the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, you find out the organizations that contribute to them, which include Aerojet Rocketdyne, Army Strategic Studies Group, the Army War College, Austell USA, the Australian Department of Defense, BAE Systems Incorporated, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, Chemring Group, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, the Department of the Navy, the Embassy of Japan, Free University Brussels, General Atomics, General Dynamics, National Steel and Shipbuilding Company. In other words, this guy works for a lobbying group that lobbies for more military spending and is supported by the military contractors and defense departments. So progressives, no, you shouldn't embrace the increasing Pentagon budget. Russia has unveiled a first glimpse of its newest submarine. It's named Prince Vladimir. It's a Boré-style nuclear ballistic missile submarine. It's capable of launching 20 intercontinental nuclear missiles, each containing 6 reentry vehicles in the 550 kiloton nuke yield, and it can reach targets 6,000 miles away. It is considered the deadliest submarine on Earth and is going to basically, the Boré class is going to be the new mainstay of the Russian Navy and the Russian nuclear triad. So that is some nasty stuff. Anyway, the Prince Vlad is on sea trials in the Arctic right now and headed for deployment. Okay, not too long ago, as you probably remember, Ilhan Omar basically got up in Congress talking about the influence of AIPAC on American politicians, for which she was soundly thrashed by members of Congress, most especially Nancy Pelosi. You know, how dare you? And Pelosi apparently exerted pressure on Omar to get her to apologize. How dare you say that AIPAC influences American politicians? American politicians are looting the United States to give to Israel out of love, out of a sincere desire to help Israel. Well, Nancy Pelosi, kind of undermining her own arguments and validating everything that Ilhan Omar said, is now confirmed as a speaker at the upcoming AIPAC conference. Okay. Tucker Carlson is out there. He's commenting on what is supposed to be the upcoming release of the final report of the Mueller investigation. And he's basically saying the dossier claims were fake then, they're fake now. And I think everybody is scrambling to try and figure out what they're going to do when this report comes out, because internal leaks are suggesting there isn't much in it outside of hearsay, rumor, and innuendo. There is no actual proof of a Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. They came up absolutely empty. And it's going to be a huge embarrassment for Mueller and his team. It's going to be a huge embarrassment for the Department of Justice. It's going to be a huge embarrassment for the FBI. And it's going to be a huge embarrassment for the Democrats. It's also going to be a huge embarrassment for the corporate media, which has been acting like it's a given that there was collusion all this time, going on, 2 years now. The only thing Mueller really has gotten is that he's apparently nailed the former Obama White House counsel and Clinton-linked attorney Greg Craig. And he's going to be charged by the Justice Department for engaging in illegal, unregistered overseas lobbying. So this is the first Democrat that Mueller got, and maybe he decided he needed to get a Democrat to make it look like this wasn't partisan all along. So Greg gets to be the sacrificial lamb. All right, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler, Democrat from New York, is apparently launching his own Trump probe, and apparently sent requests to more than 80 members of the Trump family and their associates to just get documents, tens of thousands of documents. And he's not saying what he's looking for. It's just a probe of Donald Trump. It's a fishing expedition. Now, normally when you're being investigated, you're told, we are investigating you for this. This is another fishing expedition. This is plan C after the Mueller investigation came up with nothing. And again, they're just going to go everywhere and look at everything and try and find something that would justify impeachment. Michael Cohen is, he's been beaten up by this whole process here. And apparently, the recent release of hundreds of heavily redacted court records regarding the investigation into Michael Cohen offers a concerning glimpse into the police state atmosphere that now pervades the nation. Because apparently, the investigation had access to all kinds of documents and emails for which there was no corresponding warrant. We know the federal prosecutor or the FBI or both had access to Trump's closest advisor's personal emails, therefore they were scrutinized. The most intimate communications between Cohen and the Oval Office. This is very, very dangerous. Now, this article is saying that this appears to be a reality within Washington, D.C. Everybody's spying on everybody. I would say it's way beyond the city borders. It's the reality for the entire country. Alexandria occasionally has a cortex, is embroiled in all kinds of scandals. When she first won her seat, she was in the news, pretty much all the time. She's still making news, but for all the wrong reasons. She's been caught up in this scandal involving her boyfriend, and payments, then a swampy super PAC. And this is what is so hard for the Glasshouse Democrats. They complain about the system in the swamp and super PACs, but then they use them themselves. So apparently, from Fox News, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been delisted from the board of the left-wing activist group Justice Democrats following legal and ethical questions about her affiliation with the group. So AOC's in trouble, and her numbers are already headed down. She was supposed to be the new darling girl of the Democratic Party, young, pretty, energetic, personable, tremendous presence on camera, which sounds like a Hollywood casting call. And it may have been just that. But she's in trouble now, and apparently she just thought she could do all these things with her boyfriend and the super PAC. Got to know the rules before you go on in. Okay. Senator Cory Booker claimed falsely in an interview on MSNBC's Hardball with Chris Matthews that Trump couldn't condemn Nazis. And as usual, it fails the fact check. Booker seemed to be referring to a common misconception which continues to be perpetuated by CNN, that Trump referred to violent neo-Nazis who rioted in Charlottesville, Virginia back in 2017 as very fine people. In fact, Trump was referring to the peaceful protesters who'd gathered to demonstrate against the removal of a Confederate statue, as well as to the peaceful protesters who opposed the neo-Nazis. He specifically excluded the neo-Nazis from the very fine people. But you know how politicians of the corporate media work. They'll take something, twist it around, present it as a fact, and hope that you have not got the raw data to say, hey, that's another pile of bovine excrement. All right. Thomas Frieden is out there. He supports Israel. And he made an odd comment. He said, I am not dual loyal. I always put America first. But I want to see Israel thrive just like many Irish Americans, Italian Americans, and Indian Americans and others feel about their ancestral homelands. Okay, Tom, Israel isn't your ancestral homeland. You were born in Minnesota. Your parents also lived in the United States. Wherever your grandparents came from, Israel didn't exist at the time. The only ancestral homeland in that part of the world is Palestine, which they're trying to erase from the maps here. There may be a new entry in the Clinton dead bodies list. This is being reported in the Daily Mail. And it's about Alan Kruger. He's a former Obama and Clinton advisor who reportedly committed suicide this last weekend. And it came as a shock to everybody who knew him. Now, Kruger was 58 years old, had a new book coming out in June, and was still a member of the faculty at Princeton University in New Jersey. And everybody is saying he didn't have a reason to commit suicide. But, oh yes, it was suicide, absolutely. No further details surrounding his death have emerged. But it does feel like it was another piece of wet work. Okay. The other day we were talking about how CNN won this First Amendment award, despite their habit of crushing down independent media here. Now they've won another one from the USC Annenberg School for Communication. It's the Walter Cronkite Award, and it was awarded for the Parkland Town Hall, in which the NRA spokeswoman Dana Loesch was booed and called a murderer. Got to be careful about those people with gold things on the wall. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And over in our control room, Mike is working as hard as he can to get our phone system back up and running. But again, a reminder, the equipment is old. It's worn out. And we need you to support Republic Broadcasting if we're going to stay on the air and be able to take phone calls. I mean, that's what it's come down to. So, oh, and Mike just said he's got another piece of equipment causing problems too. Well, one at a time, Mike, one at a time. Let's get the phone system replaced. Okay. The other day we were talking about how Donna Brazile, the disgraced former temporary chair of the Democratic National Committee, had landed a gig on Fox News. Fox News is swinging hard liberal, unfortunately. We don't really have a good conservative news outlet anymore. It's all liberal. So, and apparently now, former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan has been named a board member of Fox Corporation, which is the new parent company of Fox News. And this is all tangled up with that new deal where Disney has come on in and bought them. And if Disney is buying them, they're going to go even more hard left. So apparently, anyway, so let's talk about the economic news here. FedEx is warning of a global slowdown, and they're predicting that basically on their traffic numbers. Fewer people are shipping things through FedEx. They're not the only ones who are reporting it. Other shipping companies like UPS and they're all saying the same thing. The volume of shipping is going down, and that's a bad, bad, bad sign. And I know the experts are saying the recession is going to hit in 2020. I think it'll be here before the end of the year because I'm seeing the signs all around. Apparently, in February, single-family housing authorizations, meaning mortgages, dropped 5.8% over the same time the previous year. All right. Another mysterious death here. This is a J.P. Morgan managing director, and he died suddenly, unexpectedly, has links to other J.P. Morgan deaths. And the article says, when you're the largest bank in the United States and you've been compared to the Gambino crime family in a book by 2 trial lawyers, when you've pled guilty to 3 criminal felony counts brought by the United States Justice Department in the past 5 years, when you've paid over $30 billion in fines over charges of crimes against the public and investors against 2008, and when you've had an unprecedented string of employees leaping to their deaths from buildings, dropping dead at home or on the street, and 2 alleged murder-suicides by employees all in just the last 5 years, one might think law enforcement might show some interest, especially since this employer holds tens of billions of dollars of bank-owned life insurance on their workers, meaning when these people die, J.P. Morgan gets the death benefit, not the family. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Well, actually, the phone lines are still down. I shouldn't say that. Hopefully they're going to be up before the end of the hour and you can get in with your phone calls. But as of right now, it's just me speaking into the ether. We're talking about the economic news here, and China's Minister of Commerce, Zhong Shan, has underlined that Iran is considered a strategic partner of China in the region, saying that Beijing is interested in the further development of economic and trade ties with Tehran. And this is, again, a result of all these sanctions brought by the United States against Iran regarding its non-existent nuclear weapons program. They're driving Iran out of the U.S. sphere of influence, out of the U.S. economic sphere, and over to China. And China's taking advantage of that. This whole project for the new American century, it's a failed project. Everything they've done got mucked up. We mucked up Iraq, we messed up Syria, we've messed up Afghanistan. Everything that they're doing is driving countries away from the United States and toward Russia and China, or just going off and being their own little sovereign nation. And the United States has lost its reputation of standing for human rights in the world. We're not respected anymore. We're feared. That's not quite the same thing. Anyway, right now, the wars are costing $97 billion a year. That's not the total Pentagon budget. There's a lot of stuff the Pentagon spends money on. The actual direct cost of sending people and weapons to these other countries and blowing people up is $97 billion a year. And it's bankrupting America. That's a big part of what brought the Soviet Union down. The Soviet Union, in response to Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, basically started spending all kinds of money to develop ways to deal with SDI, with Star Wars. And it strained their economy to the point where it eventually cracked. Now, baby boomers are starting to retire, and they may be in trouble. Social Security, the trust fund is filled with IOUs going on back to the Clinton administration. The pensions are not safe. Many of them are filled with questionable investments, and there may be no protection there as well. So things are looking very, very grim. Getting on into immigration and globalism, apparently illegal aliens have taken $120 billion with a B from the U.S. economy in the last decade. And what we're talking about here is money that they will basically send back to their home countries. And we're hemorrhaging money because of this illegal immigrant problem. Now, apparently the Pentagon has identified an additional $12.8 billion in unused construction funds that could be used for building Donald Trump's wall. So, Donald, whoever's listening to this show on your behalf, start building the wall. Okay. And I remember, Reagan, Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Trump, please put up that wall, because it is a major problem. Now, an interesting new voice has stepped on in to this idea of securing our borders, and it's George W. Bush, and he says borders should be respected. They're not imaginary lines, and they must be respected by all. And it would be easier to, listen to this guy if he hadn't been responsible for invading and bombing all those nations while he was president, which shows a complete disregard for their borders. But apparently, George W. Bush was at a naturalization ceremony for new citizens hosted at the Bush Presidential Center in Dallas, Texas. Okay. Apparently, the federal government is relying on secret shelters to hold unaccompanied minors in possible violation of longstanding rules for the care of immigrant children. So, over at the... okay, let me just take a look. We can take some calls. All right, I'm being told that the phone lines are open, but there are still issues, and I know earlier in the day we had a caller right mid-call. The system dropped him. Okay, but I'm being told we can now bring up callers here, which we're going to do after we do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And so getting on back to this issue, the Office for Refugee Resettlement, which is the government agency that cares for unaccompanied minors, has never made the shelter's existence public or even disclosed them to the minors' own attorneys. And it's resulted in a class action case. And it's unclear how many sites are in operation. There are at least 5 in Arkansas, Florida, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, holding at least 16 boys and girls for the refugee agency, some as young as 9 years old. And everybody's saying, oh, we should just feel so sorry for those people and take care of them. And I have a lot of sympathy for those kids. But whose fault is it that they are where they are? It is the fault of the parents who brought them across that border. Another little article here. Border agents in Texas snagged more than 400 illegals in just a 5-minute span. This is a flood. This is a tsunami of illegals. And now we have Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who is running for president. She is now calling for expanding Social Security to all illegal immigrants. And she said this during a campaign stop in Davenport on March 19th. Well, Kirsten, you need to take a good look at the Social Security Trust Fund, because right now it can't even cover the payments owed to the American citizens, to the legal American citizens, let alone expand it to all the illegal immigrants. Because until they are legal immigrants, until they are citizens, how do they pay into the Social Security Trust Fund? It's amazing. And there's yet another problem down at the U.S. border. Apparently, Mexican thieves are stealing the barbed wire, and they're using it to fortify their own homes in Tijuana. And so far, they haven't been able to catch the thieves in the act. They just show up the next day, and more of the razor wire is gone. And so we probably ought to be thinking about a wall design that doesn't have concertina wire that can be stolen. Or we should go the way that Hungary did, electrify it. It is a mess. Anyway. Okay, breaking news here. And Richie Allen, if you're listening to the show, you were right. Prime Minister Theresa May has said Britain will not leave the EU on March 29th as originally planned, but promises the departure won't be delayed any further than June 30th. And May said in this Wednesday address to the nation, nearly 3 years have passed since the public voted to leave the EU. It was the biggest democratic exercise in our country's history. I came to office on a promise to deliver on that verdict. In March of 2017, I triggered the Article 50 process for the UK to exit the EU. Parliament supported it overwhelmingly. Okay, why is Theresa May delaying this? And by the way, she cannot unilaterally delay it. The EU has to agree, and here's where things get a little bit sticky. For Britain's departure to be delayed, all the member states of the EU have to unanimously agree to the delay. And both France and Italy have already said they will not agree. So it may not be up to Theresa May. And there are rumors swirling that she's about to step down anyway. Because, boy, did she mess this whole process up. So did the Remainers here. This is silly. Article out of Russia Insider. And there's supposedly a study that was published by some psychologists. And remember, there's no absolute science behind psychology or psychiatry. It's all subjective. But based on this study, experts, and I say that tentatively, are saying that every single person who questions Western military interventionism is both an anti-Semitic bigot and a Russian national. Now, I'm wondering if Russia Insider accidentally looked at The Onion, because that's how bizarre this story is. The idea, anybody who's opposed to war is an anti-Semitic bigot and a Russian agent. Another story, this one's coming out of Russia Insider, saying, is anti-Semitism a pandemic? And they're saying, no, maybe it's just a cynical ploy to discredit dissidents. And I tend to go with the latter, because every time Israel isn't getting its way in this world, they say, oh, anti-Semitism is on the rise. And look at how many of these hate crimes with swastikas and everything else turn out to be hoaxes. Whenever Israel needs political cover, the hoaxers go on out, they spray swastikas, they write offensive messages. The corporate media says, oh my goodness, it's anti-Semitism. Those evil opponents of Israel, how could they? And basically saying that it's propaganda. It's propaganda. Okay. Getting on back to that huge scandal with admissions for the elite. Story that came out of stationgossip.com. There's this UCLA student who had never played competitive soccer, was named on the 2017 elite team alongside members of the U.S. and Canadian national side after her parents transferred Facebook shares worth $250,000 to get her in. This is just discrediting the entire university system. Not that it had much credibility after all this liberal indoctrination. But this YouTube star, Emma Mondin, she's 19 years old from California, and basically she was rejected from the University of Southern California, and she made a video basically saying how disheartening it was to learn that Olivia Jade supposedly got into the school under false pretenses, which is exactly what happened. And this Emma said, I tried to do everything in my own power to give me the best shot of getting into that school, and to see someone who literally did nothing and have their parents just completely do everything for them, it just makes me disappointed. I'm absolutely in agreement on that one. It makes a joke between the admissions being bought by wealthy parents, and we were reporting earlier on how there's this whole cottage industry of people who, for a fee, will do the homework and write the term papers of these rich kids and just sail them on through the university. They get their degree. They don't really know anything because they haven't studied. The homework was all done for them. And they go out with this degree from a prestige university, and they wind up in positions of power and control. And this may in part explain why we see such poor quality thinking coming from these people. It's almost like we should have an entrance exam for the government. All right, down in Florida, remember the problem that New England Patriot owner Robert Kraft got into? They got caught soliciting prostitution at this massage parlor. Well, good old Robert Kraft, the Florida prosecutors are going to drop the charges against him. The only condition, in fact, they're dropping charges against a number of other men. The only catch is the men have to admit that had it gone to trial, they would have been proven guilty, which is an easy admission to make because they got it all on video. All right, we actually have a caller on the line. Bob in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to say something. Isn't it ironic that the same people, tribe, who cried First Amendment right to publish smut and porn back in the 60s are now crying for censorship of legitimate social political content? I mean, it may be offensive to some viewers. Is there something wrong with this picture?
Well, yes, it is. And again, the First Amendment was never about scantily clad young ladies or pole dancers or bovine feces on a canvas in an art gallery. The First Amendment exists to basically recognize our right to criticize the government, to petition the government for redress of grievances. And you're absolutely right. Absolutely. It is a stunning irony that all those, hippies back in the 60s, the porn merchants back then, who are out there saying the First Amendment allows us to be offensive. And now it's a complete reverse. You have freedom of speech as long as you don't offend anybody. Well, that's impossible to do. You can't have freedom of speech and an offense-free environment, because when you speak your mind about what's going on, there's going to be somebody somewhere who's going to stand up and say, "Oh, me, I'm offended. I'm offended. Really, you have to shut up now because I'm horribly offended by what you're saying. I'm even offended by that T-shirt that you're wearing."
Yeah, I know. It's getting crazy, isn't it?
It is very crazy, and again, I'm seeing signs of societal collapse, and this is one of them. When our basic rights are under attack, whether it's First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment's already completely gone, and the government is routinely violating the 10th Amendment. It's all coming apart. We're just all waiting for the crash, and I hope that the crash isn't accompanied by a bunch of mushroom clouds.
Yes, I agree. My God. Okay, Mike, thanks.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and it does appear that our phones are working again. Oh, we've got Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, this Brexit thing is pretty interesting. Richie Allen, he's always said that they're never going anywhere because it's like the Hotel California. You can check out whenever you want to, but you'll never leave. But he's a pretty funny guy. He also said that if wait a minute. If the hard deal Brexit, the no deal Brexit, if they just leave like they're supposed to, like the people voted for,
yes,
it's going to be the best thing for the English people, because what will immediately happen is the German car companies will they'll immediately tell Angela Merkel, whoever the prime minister is, if she's gone by then, they'll say, look, we got to make a deal with England, a two-country trade deal, because those are the two main economic powers. Germany is number one, and then England. And the Germans have to be able to sell their Mercedes and all their cars in England. And so they'll make a deal with them, and it's not going to be. They just keep catastrophe. Did you hear the deal with Roger Daltrey said something about it?
I'm aware that he said something about it. I didn't actually get to read where I didn't get to read what he actually said.
What he said was that somebody said, "Hey, you're going to have a hard time if there's a hard Brexit. You have to use your passport to get in when you're touring Europe." He said, "Well, we were touring Europe before there was an EU, basically." But he used a lot of profanity and stuff.
That's what passports are for. That's what passports are for. And when I was working in Europe back in the 1980s, I had a passport, and I didn't consider it to be a problem. Anyway, listen,
no problem,
Don, we're going to let you go. Apparently, we're still having some
Thank
issues.
you very much.
All right, you got it. And we're going to be able to take callers, but please bear with us. There are still some technical issues. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I've been informed that the problems we were having with the audio on my broadcast on RBN have been dealt with, at least temporarily. Apparently somebody stuck some chewing gum into the appropriate little crack in the system. And today's technical issues, I think, underscore the need that we have. We're not kidding when we say we're running right on the ragged edge, and today's technical issues demonstrate that. Phone system went down, still not all the way back up. Audio was having difficulty, and that's just the ugly reality. And we need your help to get this equipment replaced. And we're not talking a huge amount of money. This is not pro-level gear that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, but it does cost. So once again, we're reaching out to you and just begging you, keep us on the air. And the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during normal business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. So let's get on back here to this whole saga over the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. And what was interesting is there's emerging this incestuous relationship between the FAA and Boeing, where the FAA basically relied on Boeing to carry out safety checks on the systems of the aircraft, which would of course include that software. And apparently a lot of people don't seem to want to trust the U.S. authorities as to what exactly happened. And I'm hardly surprised. So the black box recorders are still being analyzed over in France. They reveal clear similarities between what happened in Ethiopia and what happened in Indonesia last October. And here's where it gets rather interesting. The Lion Air aircraft that crashed, the day before, they'd had a problem. And they were able to get past it because they had an off-duty pilot who was just sitting in the jump seat of the cockpit, who was able to diagnose the problem and was able to tell the crew how to disable this malfunctioning flight control system and save the aircraft. Now that should have been part of the training of the pilots, but apparently the next day, under command of a completely different crew, facing the identical malfunction, the jetliner crashed into the Java Sea, killing all 189 people aboard. Now, why was something not done that day before? That flight crew had to get on the ground and say, look, something went badly wrong with this aircraft. And that extra pilot would have said, we had to disable this malfunctioning flight control system. What was that airplane doing up in the sky the next day? Now, right now, it isn't just Boeing that's got a problem. The entire aviation industry is going to have a problem where people aren't going to trust that flying is the safest way to travel anymore. And back when the airline industry was deregulated, and the airline industry celebrated and said, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to have, lower prices, and people were predicting they're going to cut corners until we reach a point where there's going to be a series of deadly crashes, and there will be calls for regulation again, tighter regulation by the FAA. But I mean, this should have been the dead giveaway. And we're talking about the Lion Air crash, which happened months ago. And not a peep from Boeing or the FAA that there might be an issue with this aircraft. Russia is set to become the world's largest supplier of naturally grown organic foods after taking a stand against genetically engineered fake food seeds last summer, saying they've chosen a different path. Well, that's going to be something that we need to look for in the supermarkets, because here in the United States, even stuff that's declared GMO-free by the government still has GMO in it. And so we need to start looking for stores that are importing Russian agriculture if we want to stay healthy. All right, we have to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting into the world of computers, apparently over in Australia, Uber Australia illegally deployed an in-house piece of spyware called SurfCam to spy on drivers for a rival rideshare company called GoCatch. And Uber was able to compile lists of the drivers' emails, the car registration numbers, and other details, and it used these to try and poach GoCatch drivers and turn them into Uber drivers. And Uber was previously caught using SurfCam illegally in Singapore. And company spokesman reported they've conducted an audit of the use of SurfCam, and it has been prohibited. And basically, they're dumping the blame on the previous CEO, Travis Kalanick. Now, GoCatch was notable for not launching until after the Australian government had created a regulatory framework for the lawful operation of rideshare systems. By contrast, Uber entered the market before the practice was legalized. Okay. All right. All righty. Story coming on out from Rumor Mill News. Dozens of independent scientists and organizations rally behind Trump's planned climate change panel, which is basically going to be saying all this human-caused global warming stuff is nonsense. And if anyone studies climate history, you know it's always changing. It happens all the time. Mini ice ages, full-on ice ages, polar reversals, upheavals, and on and on and on. And there are ice core samples that reveal in geological time all is well, and change happens. More CO2, less CO2, also on record. And then ask yourselves why the other planets are brightening in our solar system during climate change. And what this is, it's about money and control. It's always been about money and control. Al Gore ended his run for the presidency broke. And then he got this little thing going about, I'm going to scare the world with this mockumentary, An Inconvenient Truth, and I'm going to buy and sell carbon credits. And by the way, that whole carbon credits situation, Al Gore set that up with the help of Ken Lay of Enron. And what they were going to do is they were basically going to cheat planet Earth with carbon dioxide the way Enron had cheated California with electricity. And Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. Oh my goodness, there's a problem. Humans are warming the planet. Well, you know, we have a solution we're willing to sell you. And that's how politicians work. You know, you're going to have pay carbon taxes, or you're going to have carbon credits for breathing, reproducing, fireplaces, furnaces, square feet of houses and cars. And surrender your sovereignty, your ability to make decisions about your own lifestyle, to a global environmental authority. And it has been a scam. And I'm looking at all this flooding that's going on right now in the Midwest. And obviously, it's been caused by the fact there was a lot more snow this winter than people were expecting, or at least politicians were expecting. Anybody reading the original Farmer's Almanac knew it was going to be a tough winter. But what's going on here is we have a government that has become entirely detached from the real world. They're caught up in this human-caused global warming. Snowfalls are a thing of the past, and that is their mindset. And no amount of snow falling past the window can change that. And as a result, they got caught by surprise by the flooding. And there has been severe infrastructure failure. Levees have been overtopped. Levees are collapsing. And it's a major problem. I saw a before and after satellite photo of Nebraska. Those people, their lives are being destroyed. I don't know if they have flood insurance or not, but a real problem that all of us are going to be dealing with is that a lot of that farmland has now been drowned. And the crops that were on that farmland being planted for spring, that's now all been washed away. Livestock has been drowned. There's going to be food shortages in this country come summertime. All because our government wanted to play the human-caused global warming card to get your money and obedience, and really couldn't be bothered actually dealing with what's going on in the real world. we have consultants for that, and we pay them lots of money and then ignore what they say. Now, I have mentioned many, many times that the government likes to plant kooky ideas on the internet and the independent media to try and damage our brand, to make us look like we're unreliable, and drive the masses back to corporate media. So far, it isn't working. There are entire websites that have been set up that look like they're serious news sites, but they do nothing but put out garbage and hope other websites will link to it so that they can be embarrassed down the road. And these are the people who come out with how the Apollo moon landings were faked. The government is hiding flying saucers in Area 51, chemtrails, HAARP, all this kind of stuff. And one of the latest that they've come up with is the flat Earth. And I remember seeing an issue of National Geographic in a waiting room where they were bemoaning, why people don't trust science any longer. And of course, what they had right on there, the flat earthers, those people, those kooks on the internet, they think the earth is flat. Obviously, no, we don't. It's a con job. It's another put up. But anyway, there is this article that says flat earthers are planning a trip to Antarctica to reach the end of the world. Apparently, they want to walk up to that ice shelf and gaze out into the void. But apparently, members of this group, they were actually interviewed by Forbes. And so these members of this group, they're going to travel to Antarctica to prove once and for all the planet is not spherical. And I know the reason Forbes ran this story. Again, it's corporate media trying to win back the audience from the independent media. Meanwhile, the Flat Earth International Conference, which is not connected with the Flat Earth Society, will embark on a cruise sometime in 2020 for its annual event. And they're saying the 2020 excursion is just a cruise, and the group isn't going to try and find the ice shore at the end of the world. They may have a rough time of it because that band of water around Antarctica is some of the roughest oceans in the world because the currents can flow. There's nothing to block them. Unlike in the northern hemisphere, you've got all those land masses that keep the currents kind of constrained. Down there between the tip of South America and Antarctica, or the tip of Africa and Antarctica, it's just all open water and the currents just get insane. Now, as far as the flat Earth, it's astounding. And it comes out of the Bible, which is always talking about the four corners of the earth. But we know that the earth is spherical for a very simple reason, and that's the lunar eclipses. Every time there's a lunar eclipse, no matter where the moon is in the sky, the shadow of the earth is circular as it passes over the moon. So the only shape that casts a circular shadow, no matter what direction the light is coming from, is a sphere. And the ancient Greeks knew this. They even calculated the approximate size of the moon with a rather surprising amount of accuracy, I might add. It's a hoax. They're trying to discredit independent media. And those of us who are working in independent media, we must be careful. We must be vigilant that we are not being set up to be embarrassed. Okay. I'm looking at this massive inland ocean in Mozambique from tropical cyclone Aiea, I think it's how it's pronounced. And it's just those poor people. Those poor people. Okay. Article coming out of Blacklisted News here. Covert chemical warfare. 100,000 deaths a year. And in 2011, there was a modest uptick in the number of prescriptions written in the U.S. And that was back, it was basically 4 billion prescriptions. In 2011, doctors wrote these prescriptions. That's an average of roughly 13 prescriptions for each man, woman, and child. That's about 1 new prescription every month for every American. And of course, the drug industry is popping the champagne corks and just having a fine old time. These numbers are astronomical. It's all about making money. And sometimes the drugs they're selling are for imaginary diseases. Remember the guy who came up with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, where kids in school who are not paying attention because the teacher is boring were diagnosed, they've got ADHD, and they were given these pills. And the guy who came up with ADHD shortly before he died, he said, it's a made-up illness. It was created to sell pills. And you see that being repeated today with modern pharmaceutical advertising, where they're out there. It's like they invent a new disease or condition or illness every single month and then say, this stuff is terrible. It's epidemic. But you can go to your doctor and ask for the latest and greatest medicine. It's another sign about how corrupt our society has become, where it's all about pushing product on us, whether it's pills or vaccines, to make money without regard to whether there's any real benefit, and even worse, without regard to if there's potential harm. Okay, up at the International Space Station, there is a new threat, and it's not space aliens, but apparently concern is being raised that a prolonged exposure to microgravity and cosmic radiation without Earth's atmosphere to protect themselves wreaks heck on the immune system. And a new study from NASA has revealed that the herpes virus can sometimes be reawakened when a person leaves Earth and is put into the conditions of space. And NASA found that some 53% of astronauts who embarked on short-term space shuttle flights show signs of herpes, and that number rose to 61% with those who were on longer ISS missions. Other viruses which were present in the astronauts' samples included chickenpox, shingles, and most prominently oral and genital herpes. Now, anybody who is engaged in spaceflight or at the ISS, they understand and accept they're exposed to cosmic radiation to a much higher degree than they would be here on Earth. And by the way, before you start screaming about, how horrible that is, those of you who fly on commercial passenger jets need to understand, when you're up there at 30,000 feet, you're exposed to more cosmic rays than you would be on the ground. But you accept that as a risk because of the benefits of getting from point A to point B on a modern passenger jetliner, assuming it's not the 737 MAX 8. So, getting on back to this NASA study, the lead researcher, Dr. Satish Mehta of NASA's Johnson Space Center, said during spaceflight, there's a rise in the secretion of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which are known to suppress the immune system. Well, I can understand why they'd be having an adrenaline rush. And he goes on to say, we find the astronauts' immune cells, particularly those that normally suppress and eliminate viruses, become less effective during spaceflight and sometimes for up to 60 days thereafter, which means even after they return to Earth, it's going to be about 2 months before their immune system gets back to normal. Okay. Apparently, there's another expedition, this one with YouTube star Logan Paul, that are going to go to Antarctica to prove the Earth is flat. And apparently his expedition includes a list of celebrities, including rapper B.O.B. And this expedition says they're going to find the edge of the world. Well, as I understand the flat Earth theory, You don't need to go to Antarctica to find the edge of the world. The edge of the world is in all directions. So you might want to think about going someplace that's maybe a little more survivable. But these are all going to wind up with these huge, huge embarrassments. And out in California, about 150,000 people have flocked to a California city for what's being called the Poppy Apocalypse. And this is actually something that happens every year, and I remember it happening when I lived in California. This happens out in Lake Elsinore. And depending upon hydration and other factors, sometimes there's only a few poppies, sometimes there's a lot, and it can look like that scene from The Wizard of Oz. And again, these are not opium poppies, so you're not going to fall asleep like Dorothy did. But it's just a very beautiful thing to see. Unfortunately, it's creating a huge traffic jam and a logistics nightmare. And Interstate 15 literally became a parking lot. People fainted in the heat, and apparently a dog romping through the poppies was bitten by a rattlesnake, which is something that we do have in California. And Lake Elsinore had tried to prepare for the crush of people drawn by the super bloom, and it even offered a free shuttle service to the top viewing spots, but it wasn't enough, and it got to just be this huge, huge mess. Okay, we're coming up here on our last commercial break for the day, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is still out there pushing her Green New Deal. And then we found out it wasn't really original with her, that in fact it appears in a 2009 United Nations document. And now it turns out that the Green New Deal first appeared in Britain in 2008 in a 44-page report by the Green New Deal group, simply called a Green New Deal. And basically, this Green New Deal group is stacked with radical members of the Green Movement, including Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, Larry Elliott, economics editor of The Guardian, Colin Hines, co-director of the Finance for the Future, former head of Greenpeace International's economics unit, Tony Juniper, former executive director of Friends of the Earth, Jeremy Leggett, founder and chairman of Solar Century and Solar Aid, Carolyn Lucas, Green Party member of the European Parliament, and on and on. So it's just all loaded up. So they've been working on this thing for a long time. And Alexandria is just the front face they're putting on it. So, and it can't be made to work. I mean, we're talking a financial burden on the American people that they simply cannot bear. And I guess politicians, the globalists, the liberals, are still living in this fantasy land where they think the American people still have lots and lots of money. Because after all, they have lots and lots of money. So they just sort of assume that we're doing okay, which we're not. We're not. If the Green New Deal were to be implemented, our economy would absolutely collapse. And it's all about getting rid of carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is an essential molecule for life. It's plant food. It is not, as the EPA likes to declare, a toxic pollutant. If there's no CO2, there's no life on Earth. That's what it comes down to. And as CO2 levels have risen over the last few years, even as the planet gets colder, I might add, satellites are showing plant life on Earth is increasing. It's encroaching back into deserts because there's more plant food in the air. Okay. Apparently, there was this Babylonian stone that was looted during the Iraq War, and it was seized at the Heathrow Airport, and it's being returned home. The tablet dates 3,000 years to the reign of Nebuchadnezzar I, and supposedly there's a curse on the stone that will destroy anybody who harms it. So anyway, it was thought to have been trafficked for the antiquities market after taken from Iraq during the looting of archaeological sites in 1994 to 2004. Okay, there we are. There's the music. End of the show here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody. Please use email, paper mail, face-to-face. Social media is a complete desert right now. It's totally useless. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. I think the technical issues we had on today's show underscore how desperate the situation has become. So have a good evening. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.